Hello, I'm Jack Gariss. May I now invite you on a journey? It's not very far, just inside your own head. And yet, it is a journey that can transcend space and time. This exploration of the microcosmic universe of you. And many a wayfarer have preceded us in this unbounded realm of our own ground of being. Ancient Upanishad seers, courageous Buddhist monks, serene Taoists, ecstatic Sufis, solitary Christian hermits, Jewish Kabbalists. But whatever their path, their vision, eventually they all reach the same fog-enshrouded summit of oneness. It is easy enough to talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? By traveling the various paths or ways of meditation, you may judge the results for yourself. Then you're not so apt to fall into the error of accepting prescribed postures, mantras, contemplative methods, breathing or relaxation techniques as magical formulas, but merely as tested practical aids for heightened sensitivity and awareness, which may allow you to experience directly the isness, the thusness, beyond duality, beyond the contradiction of contraries, to experience oneness, at-one-ment, atonement, totality, the wholeness, the holy. By such direct experiencing you will not confuse the pointing finger with the moon. That is, not confuse the dogma, interpretation, or technique with the experience itself. Take your own trip. Know thyself. As Buddha said, be a lamp unto thyself. Buddha said, accept no authority other than your own inner wisdom. So let this be an experiential way to dissolve the calcifying duality which makes me a stranger to you, and you a stranger in a strange land, an alien within your own universe. This will be a wayless way through the gateless gate of the here and now. As Alexandra David-Néel, a most remarkable French woman who became a Tibetan Lama, once said, all doctrines are essentially false because they are doctrines. Whatever the validity of any meaningful experience or insight, once it has been processed by the cerebral cortex, once it has been reduced to words, fragmented, the perceiver separated from the process of perceiving and the object of perception. This as contrasted to that. But once this multidimensional experience is encapsulated within static symbols, compressed into a linear perspective, the result can only be a faint, wavering shadow of that first magical moment. If nothing else, perhaps these programs will cultivate your awareness of first-time experiencing. Even though you may have seen that face, smelled that rose, touched that hand, 1,000 times before. Dr. R.D. Laing, British psychoanalyst and authority on schizophrenia, writes, quote, "As adults, we have forgotten most of our childhood, not only its content but its flavor. As men of the world, we hardly know of the existence of the inner world. We barely remember our dreams and make little sense of them when we do. And as for our bodies, we retain just sufficient proprioceptive sensations to coordinate our movements and to ensure the minimal requirements for bi-social survival, to register fatigue, signals for food, sex, defecation, sleep. Beyond that, little or nothing. Our capacity to think, except in the service of what we are dangerously deluded in supposing is our self-interest, and in conformity with common sense, is pitifully limited. Our capacity even to see, hear, touch, taste, and smell is so shrouded in veils of mystification that an intensive discipline of unlearning is necessary for anyone before one can begin to experience the world afresh with innocence, truth, and love. The beginning is always the way of unlearning. Ignorance, ignorance. How to unlearn your conditioned response to life, a conditioning imposed upon you by your culture, your faith trips, your prejudices. How to ignore the labels, categories, concepts that veil the ever-changing reality. The changeless changing. The path of knowledge, of learning, is to add day by day. The path of liberation, unlearning, is to subtract day by day. Lao-Tzu, the legendary founder of Taoism, the ancient Chinese way of liberation, said, "In Tao, the only motion is returning. Returning to first-time experiencing, as though every perception, every encounter you have this day were experienced for the first time in all its wonder, awe, and joy of discovery." So this becomes not only a process of reawakening our senses, sensory awareness, and re-feeling the many subtle gradations of sensory response, but this process of being cognition also involves memory. Do you remember your first tree? When you were a child and you first became conscious of a single tree? Perhaps a tree in your backyard? Can you remember? What a mind trip that was. Wow. The tallness, going up and up and up to the very heavens, and then touching the bark, perhaps rubbing your fingers over the rough or smooth exterior, perhaps chipping away with your fingernails to see what lay beneath, and those roots mysteriously plunging into the darkness of the earth. Or perhaps lying down and looking up into the vaulting branches and the myriad of leaves dancing in a soft breeze. Do you remember? How many hours you could contemplate the delight of a single tree? the ants scurrying up and down the trunk, the birds swaying on fragile branches, and you dreaming of the day when you too shall climb to that very branch. But we grow older. We become accustomed to the miracle of a tree. So memory begins to dominate our perception of a tree. So many thousands of images flood in upon us that we must necessarily direct our attention only to that stimulus which immediately concerns us. We condition ourselves by coding what we see into language, thus allowing for immediate judgment of visual perception. Walking along a path, we pass an object. Our peripheral vision registers trunk, branches, leaves. So the neural message flashes to the brain, tree. This word then helps decode memory associations of trees. The real tree becomes an impressionistic image of previously seen trees. Now, whatever the uniqueness of that individual tree, the isness of treeing becomes lost to us. By such lack of awareness, we tend to see only analogies, past representations of immediate perceptions. And so it is with much of what we see, even friends. A familiar shape looms into our vision. Message flashed. Oh, that's Fred. The code name, Fred, reactivates memories concerned with Fred. We see him and talk to him through the distorted reflections of memory. He will act in such and such a fashion because I remember him acting in such a fashion. Whatever growth may have occurred within Fred, whatever grief or joy had transmuted his old values, we still visualize him and respond to him through the cataracts of memory. And thus our visual perceptions can become an unending succession of undifferentiated images which only approximate reality. Or, as the Hindus say, Maya, the veils of illusion. Is it any surprise, then, that our age has been characterized as a continual state of boredom, disenchantment, the blahs, which can be the prelude to mental illness, or possibly the cultural medium for breeding violence? But cleansing the doors of perception is only the beginning, the first stage of the journey on the way of liberation. An increased awareness of the living, arabesque patterns of your senses leads inevitably to the source of those senses. Who is the receiver of all of these impressions? Who are you? Said the caterpillar. Alice in Wonderland replied rather shyly, I hardly know, sir, just at present. At least I knew who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have changed several times since then. Well, many of us do not know, even when we get up in the morning, who we really are. Oh, yes, you know your name, your social security number. You know the roles you play, family and professional roles. You may have been through therapy or group encounters and thus be cognizant of some of the emotional games with which you involve yourself. But is that all there is to you? This mask, this persona, this ego? Surely not. As a Zen koan asks, What was the nature of your original face before you were born? Who is the you behind the face in the mirror? And know thyself proclaims the inscription at the temple of the Delphic oracle. And so the wayless way turns inward, setting sail upon your private sea, the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean of your being, as Thoreau said, a meditation of being, an ecstatic probe into your inner space. However, the first venture onto the distant planet of your mind may be a frightening experience. Half-formed thought struggling to be born, disembodied mouths chattering inanely, a never-ending assembly line processing every new perception to fit your prejudice, your beliefs, and then stamping the warped perceptions with your programmed labeling. He is an activist, that one is a communist, or a pig, or a revisionist, or a hippie, or a bircher, or over 30, or whatever is your current brand of truth. Fear slithers out of your unconscious, paralyzing you with the venom of yesterday. Enticing hopes materialize to beguile you into the mist of tomorrow. Memory traces like hot geysers spew forth repressed sulfuric emotions. And everywhere the lingering, sickening, sweet odor of unfulfilled desires. It is not surprising that many of us want to drop out of our own minds and retreat into activity for activity's sake. Sometimes action is really inaction, and inaction, action. How can you ever achieve a stillness, an inner serenity out of this nightmarish Dali landscape? Well, that is what meditation is all about. Techniques, tricks, what the Buddhists call upaya, skillful means, tricks or techniques for tricking you out of what is ironically termed normal consciousness, which is, as Dr. Abraham Maslow suggests, all too often deficiency cognition. That is a dependence upon the environment, people other than yourself, for love, relations, security, identity. And what is the alternative? Expanded consciousness, self-actualization, being cognition. Other forms of consciousness which, as William James, the American pragmatist, said, may be separated from our normal or rational consciousness by the filmiest screen. But of all meditative techniques for achieving a quiet mind, one of the most effective is mere observation, non-evaluating, non-judgmental attention. The Taoist phrase for this attention is wu wei, desireless, non-interfering awareness. You cannot repress unwanted thoughts. You cannot desire liberation. You cannot will serenity. For who is the I who represses, who desires, who wills? Who is the I who seeks to know you? By Wu Wei, Taoist perception, the projections, the concepts of your mind dissolve into actionless activity. The chattering ceases, the assembly line slows down, the ectoplasmic fears and hopes drift away, and pure consciousness begins to emerge. Not meta-thinking any longer, that is, thinking about thinking, but rather mind without thought, the no-mind of Wang Bo, the 9th century Chan master. And it is characterized by a predominance of the slowed alpha brain rhythm pattern. Consciousness becoming conscious of itself. The Descartes premise of I think, therefore I am, experientially transmutes into I am, therefore I think. And out of this dawning stillness arises a realization of the organic integration and inner penetration of your mind and body. They cannot be separated. What begins as an exploration of your mind necessarily becomes a journey through the microcosmic universe of your own body. A still mind, a mind of pure awareness, free of conflicting distractions, cannot dwell within a tense body. We have too long betrayed our body, made of it a living sacrifice upon the twin altars of Puritan ethics and Platonic philosophy. Yes, we chanted like a true believer, we are naturally wicked, and therefore our animal natures must be restrained or repressed, else the world shall be devastated by our wickedness. And then we march forth in praise of morality, God, love, democracy, and slaughter our own species. An act so unnatural that no predatory animal, be it Siberian tiger or African jackal, would commit such an offense. As Dr. Alexander Lowen writes, if man loses sight of his animal nature, he becomes a robot. If he subverts his animal nature, he becomes a demon. Through our knowledge of modern biology and physiology, along with such active meditative techniques as Hatha Yoga, Taoist movement, Theravada, Buddhist right mindfulness, we can experience the ancient non-verbal wisdom of the body. It is an adventure that can take us from the midbrain, that is the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the limbic system, the generator of our emotions, through the autonomic network of motor nerve cells regulating digestion, blood pressure, temperature, to the intricate biochemical galaxy of our glands. Entire communities of self-regulating systems within our organism, and except in moments of crisis, never apparent to our presumptuous brain, the cerebral cortex, the seat of rational thought. An experiential awareness of these systems tap a reservoir of unused energies. For example, if the non-interfering attention that was directed toward your mind, wu-wei, desireless awareness, is directed toward your anxiety symptoms, bringing those symptoms or physical sensations into the focus of Taoist perception, you will discover that those anxiety symptoms begin to disappear. The energy that activated your fight or flight reactions are switched to other nerve paths, to more constructive fulfillments. But equally, we shall become cognizant of the tidal role that your muscles, voluntary and involuntary, play in the microcosmic drama of you. Muscles express emotions. Chronic contractions of deep muscles The unlived lines of your body, as one poet expressed it, the body armor, can only result in negative emotions. Through such modern techniques as autogenics and self-massage, in combination with yoga asanas, we can cultivate muscular relaxation and thus respond afresh to the inner and the outer stimuli. Indeed, it may well be that the awareness of visceral and kinesthetic experiences may not only produce an inner harmony and integration, but may be the principal means of our apprehension of the unity of the universe. For ordinarily, with the 5 conventional senses, we respond only on one sensory level to a stimulus: ear, sound, eye, sight, nose, smell. But through our vague, all-embracing, organic senses, visceral, kinesthetic, we respond totally, wholly, to the ever-changing changelessness, the oneness of the cosmos. Or, as Norman Brown said, in such an awareness, the human body would become polymorphously perverse, delighting in that full life of all the body which it now fears, producing a consciousness which does not negate any more. Alfred Whitehead, in his philosophy of organism, says, the living organ of the experience is the living body as a whole. The holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y, body. And here it is interesting to meditate upon the origin of whole, W-H-O-L-E, which is from the Old English word hale, H-A-L, from which also comes hale, H-A-L-E, hearty, health, and holy, H-O-L-Y. The holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y body, the healthy body, the H-O-L-Y body. And so we discover in our intrapersonal journey that the relaxed body, at ease with itself, not diseased, is a reflecting pool of the serene mind. And such a person, wholly at atonement with himself, immediately perceives his oneness with his environment. An ecological awareness. You, the isness of you, does not stop at the edge of your outer skin. You are continuous with nature. This earth grew you, just as it grew other animals and plants and mountains, and as in turn the universe grew the earth. So in actuality, you are the flower that grew from the seed pot of earth within the cosmic soil of energy. You are the universe becoming conscious of itself, as is every other creature, plant, stone, and star, each at its own level of awareness. Cultures and religions have experienced this one in all. Ramakrishna, 19th century Hindu mystic, said, everything was full of consciousness. The image was consciousness. The altar was consciousness. The very door sills were consciousness. R.M. Buck, a Canadian psychiatrist, writes of his extroverted mystical experience in his book, Cosmic Consciousness. Quote, among other things, I did not merely come to believe, but I saw that the universe is not composed of dead matter, but is, on the contrary, a living presence. End of quote. Or as the Mahayana Buddhists say, nirvana is samsara, everyday reality. This altered state of perception, that is, aware of the differences and yet perceiving the oneness permeating these differences. Expanded consciousness may also occur in peak experiences, which do not differ in kind but only in degree from the classical, extroverted, or spontaneous mystical experience. I'm certain most of you have undergone a peak experience sometime in your life, but it may lay buried or forgotten under the trivia of daily necessities. Perhaps you were gazing into a sunset when suddenly it seemed as though some miraculous transformation is taking place within you, an inner stillness. All of your anxieties and hang-ups dissolve into a timeless moment of childlike wonder. You are you, gloriously so, and yet you, transcend your petty ego games, and expand into a harmonious blending with all life. It may not have been a sunset, but a sunrise, or the view of a distant horizon, or surfing, that suspended moment on the crest of a wave, or the birth of a child, or it may have been an orgasm with you, and when you and your beloved were fused into one, or perhaps a long-awaited solution to a mathematical problem or scientific experiment, or even the smile of a passing stranger. Do you remember? Self-validating, self-justifying, being cognition. Ecstasy suffused with serenity, not needing other than itself to be itself. What Meister Eckhart calls isness, the Buddhist calls suchness, and the Taoist self-soul. How then can you reconcile such an one-in-all experience with the still prevailing Western concept of man as Adam in the Garden of Eden, man's dominion over nature, his God-given right to exploit and squander the resources of Earth, and soon the solar system? There is no reconciliation. Pollution of the air, land, and water is pollution of your own body. The extermination of any animal or plant makes you just a little less whole, a little less human. When you perceive, or rather experientially encounter, the interrelatedness of you and your environment, then you are free to act, not merely react, within your environment. And then you are able truly to relate to other individuals. For only when you love yourself can you love another. For if you are deficit motivated, that is, if you need gratification, need love, need respect, need security, then you tend to manipulate other people, even your loved ones, as a means of satisfying your needs. They become objects of your gratification rather than persons within their own right. As Martin Buber said, it becomes an I-it relationship instead of an I-thou relationship. We have all seen mothers hold on to their children because they need their love. Such deficiency love between parents and children, or man and woman, is all too often a love-hate or an anxiety-hostility relationship. But if in the course of of your inner trip, you develop a Taoist perception, non-evaluating, non-judgmental awareness of your own mind and body. Then that non-needing perception can also be directed toward other human beings. This altered state of perception, choiceless awareness, allows you to see not only the oneness, the being that permeates you and that individual, but also the marvelously unique expression of being manifested in that person. The uniqueness, the unduplicated individuality found equally in the snowflake, the leaf of a tree, or the song of a bird. The Buddhists call this perception dispassionate compassion. Then, if you love another, such being love is no longer an emotional karate, for it is non-needing, non-dominating, non-possessive. It is fulfilling, accepting, giving, a joyful end in itself. Naturally, you may stop anywhere along the way, content with a particular vista, a degree of increased awareness, and that's groovy. But there is one final vision possible, or more accurately, non-vision. The experiencing of the oneness, the indivisible wholeness, the unity of the universe. Beyond thought, beyond sensation, beyond image, beyond the one in all, to the one. And you're not observing this wholeness, you are it. As the Sufis say, O thou I. Now, any way of liberation, process of enlightenment, existential rebirth, experienced by men and women of all cultures and all ages and all religions, is really an expanding awareness or consciousness, and thereby participation, in an infinite circle, a round dance of existence. And since the circle is infinite and timeless, each of us, you and I, are the still center of that dance, which is to say that there is no path of liberation, no process of enlightenment, for there is no place to go, no goal to obtain. You are there all the time. And that is why all meditation is trickery. To trick you into the realization that you are already seated in the heart of the thousand-petaled lotus of being, that the kingdom of God is within you. This unitive consciousness may be called cosmic consciousness, God, Nirvana, Brahma. The name matters very, very little. As Dr. Abraham Maslow writes, when you perceive the unity of the cosmos, fuse with it, rest in it, completely satisfied in your yearning for oneness, this may be the moment when you are most fully human. Do you remember my saying that so oftentimes our present perceptions are really clouded by memory? So wherever you are sitting now, in a room, patio, whatever, would you glance to your right for a moment and then forward again? Now, close your eyes and recreate the image of that section of the room that you looked at. Now, do you notice that the image tends to be impressionistic? That is, the objects do not seem to be too clear, and perhaps the colors are a bit faded. Now, open your eyes again, look at that part of the room, and compare your image of what you saw with what the reality is. Now, do you see any differences? Do you discover that perhaps some things that you had placed in that part of the room, a book or flowers, whatever, a pillow, that you may have placed there recently, you did not include in your image? Because you were recreating the memory of what you had seen there previously rather than what you are actually looking at now? And what about the colors? Are they the same? Or do you find, as some people oftentimes do, that some objects in the room were not even in the same position? Well, now, this is not really a fair comparison, because the room, of course, you are very familiar with. But try this when you walk into a new environment someday. Just glance about quickly, then close your eyes, if you have the opportunity, and compare, visualize what you have just seen. And then open your eyes and compare that image with the reality. And I think you will discover, unless you are an exceptional person, I think you will discover that all too often you are merely recreating objects that you have experienced in the past and are replacing those objects with the actual reality that exists there. If you're walking outside, the trees, for example, the tree of your image may be quite impressionistic compared to the actual tree as you look at it again, and that you could recreate in your image. We've all known people who have gone on vacations and they come back with a very vague impression of what they've seen. Their descriptions sound just as though they were the houses that are in their own neighborhood, rather than perhaps the individualistic settings of wherever they happen to be. Some people go around the world and they see very little. And most of the times the impressions they bring back are not the actual impressions of the sites, be it some famous site, but the postcard impression of that site. Allow yourself to be a quiet, serene pool of water reflecting your environment. A pool of water does not try to change the image of the geese flying overhead. It does not try to interpret the clouds floating by. It does not distort through its own memory or troubled waters the image, the reflection of the moon in its waters. This is an old Zen or Taoist image, but it's very, very effective. Allow your mind to be such a quiet, serene pool, wherein every reflection of your environment is allowed to be reflected without distortion. And then I think you will discover certain very interesting things begin to happen. you'll discover that you and your environment, however new that environment may be, that you and your environment seem to be coming closer together. There is not that distance of the observer and the observed, the judgmental vision. But you are allowing that environment to be. And you are coming into that being, that isness of the environment, without distortion. I think you will also discover that this kind of Taoist perception brings with it its own kind of serenity. Because you begin to accept the thing as it is in itself without needing to add any interpretation or projection upon it. Also, I think you will begin to discover that when you use just the sight, just the sense of sight, of seeing this way, that in time you will discover that the other senses begin to respond the same way. Because in the beginning, naturally, if you are cleansing the doors of your perception, you walk into a new environment, you will try to fix every object in your mind clearly, divide them, this and this and this, and then reassemble them in your mind as though it were a jigsaw puzzle. Well, that is using the linear perspective, and this our culture teaches us. This is the way our culture teaches us to see, because we are trained to see the printed word. This follows this, follows this, this is separated from this. The perceiver, again, separated from the perceiving and the object of perception. And so we tend to see that way, because sentences are constructed in that fashion. But if you allow yourself to participate in the total environment, in other words, non-discriminating perception, non-judgmental perception, you will suddenly begin to discover the multidimensional qualities of that environment. That there are many levels of awareness possible, just as all the sounds that are coming through the microphone. And that this environment is not static, but it is ever-changing. And you, in the quiet reflection, the quiet pool, the reflecting pool of your mind, allows this change to come forth. You become part of that change. It becomes many waves of impressions, sense impressions, that sweep you up into the creative energy of that particular environment. You become one with it. Now, in the same way, using the Taoist perception, the choiceless awareness, as you look at that environment, allow your breathing to reflect that same awareness. And by that I mean, as you look at the environment, allowing that environment to happen as it happens, allowing it to be a happening, Become aware at the same time of your own breathing. And don't try to change it or manipulate it, but merely be aware of your breathing as you are looking at your environment. For breath is the bridge of the conscious and the unconscious. And just as the Theravadan Buddhists say, just by becoming aware of the breath, being aware if it is a long breath or a short breath. Any tensions that may be within your body tend to dissolve. For again, breathing is very close to our emotions. We breathe a certain way with anxiety, with fear, with love, with hate, with awe. So oftentimes, breathing expresses the true nature of the person, which you can observe, far more than any words that he may say, or even expression on his face. So become aware of your breath. Allow your breath to breathe of its own accord. And it is as though your environment were breathing you. It breathes you. Effortless, free breathing. And as you allow the environment to breathe you, breathing without effort, see how this influences the vision of your environment. And now, let us try a relaxation technique, which is actually a blending of autogenics, which is a psychophysiological technique developed in Central Europe and used in Canada and England, along with a Hatha Yoga asana. So if you would lie down upon the floor or the couch and see if you can allow your body to become ecologically aware of the environment. See if you can allow your body to merge with your support. Can you allow your ego defenses to dissolve so that you are truly supported by your environment, merging with the floor or the couch? All right. Now then, center your awareness, your consciousness, on your toes. Now, go into them. Wiggle them if necessary to know that they are there. And feel them letting go, letting go, letting go. And now then, bring your awareness, your consciousness, on up through the feet, from the ankles to the knees. Now, go into those calf muscles. Feel them letting go, letting go, letting go. And now it is as though a warm, comforting ocean wave of being is sweeping on up over the toes, the feet, the ankles, on up to the knees, absorbing that area, becoming one with that area, washing away any of the tensions that may exist there. And now, bring your consciousness on up from the knees to the hips. Go into those muscles, feel them letting go, letting go, letting go. And now that same warm ocean wave is sweeping on up from the knees to the hips, absorbing that area, becoming one with that area, washing away any of the tensions that may exist there. And now, allow your awareness, your consciousness, to center upon the abdomen. Now, go into that area, become it, you are it, and feel those muscles letting go and letting go and letting go. And now that same warm, comforting ocean wave is sweeping on up over the abdomen, absorbing that area, becoming one with that area, until it seems as though the very rhythm of your breathing is the rhythm of the ocean waves, as though it is breathing you. The universe is breathing you. And now allow your consciousness to center upon the chest. Feel the muscles between the ribs letting go and letting go and letting go. And now that same warm, comforting ocean wave is sweeping on up over the chest, absorbing that area, becoming one with that area. And now allow your consciousness, your awareness, to center upon your hands, and then from the wrist to the elbow, going into that area. Feel those muscles letting go, letting go, letting go. And now that same warm, comforting ocean wave is sweeping on up over the hands, on up the wrist to the elbows, absorbing that area, becoming one with that area. And now allow your consciousness to center upon the area from the elbow to the shoulders. Those long muscles, feel them letting go and letting go and letting go. And now that same warm, comforting ocean wave is sweeping on up from the elbow to the shoulders, absorbing that area, until it now seems as though you are floating in this ocean of oneness, in the sea of serenity, with only your head above water, and the cool breeze brushing across your forehead. Completely at one-ment with your environment. The sense of serenity and peace and bliss that comes when you allow your body to become ecologically aware of the environment.